Welcome to Season 3 of Candid Leadership. Throughout this season, I'm taking recommendations from listeners to speakers with leaders and mentors of inspiration. Today's guest was recommended by a fellow podcast listener. Juliana Vida is a retired U.S. Navy military officer and experienced technology executive. She is now serving in the role of Group Vice President and Chief Strategic Advisor at Splunk, where she most recently served as the Chief Technical Advisor for the software company's public sector business. Previously, she served as a VP and team manager of executive programs at Gartner for almost 2.5 years. Her last role in the Navy, she served as the Navy's Deputy CIO for the Department of Defense. Her military career spanned over 27 years. She sees technological innovation as an opportunity not only to drive business and mission outcomes, but to also motivate workers of all ages and levels of technological maturity to contribute in meaningful ways and do their best work. Juliana, welcome to Candid Leadership.
Thank you, Candace. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
This is awesome. It's great to have you on this podcast because your amazing background is really phenomenal. I've heard you on some other podcasts as well, and that's why I had to snatch you up for the very last episode of the season. But I would love to start diving into that amazing background of yours. Let's talk to the listeners about kind of the circuitous start to your career.
Yeah. Thank you, Candace. First of all, let me say I never could have foreseen or architected my career the way it's turned out at all. Without boring people too much, I'll just say coming out of high school, I was, college. I was ready to go to college and I was all sights on big schools, small schools, what most, high school seniors are going through this time of year. And then by a fluke, my sister, I have a twin sister, and we lived in downtown Lancaster, Pennsylvania. She happened to walk into a recruiting office, a Navy recruiting office, signed up for the Navy within a couple months of us graduating, came home and said, guess what? I just joined the Navy. And I was like, are you out of your mind? Like that wasn't even on our radar. That was not part of our life. Long story short, I end up going with her. I threw away my ideas about college for just a short time because I thought, I'll go in, I'll learn a language. She had signed up to be a linguist, a cryptologic technician interpreter. And I love foreign languages and thought, okay, I'll go learn that. And then I'll get my GI Bill money for college. And then I'll go back to college. Then I'll just do this Navy thing for a couple of years and then do the college track. Well, that didn't happen. I did enlist in the Navy. I enjoyed language school. I was very good at it. And I had someone believe in me and say, hey, do you ever think about the Naval Academy? And I had not. And so I applied, I got in, I graduated from the academy. And luckily, there's a lot of timing in my story. Luckily, the year that I graduated, Congress had changed the law to allow women to go into combat roles. It was the combat exclusion law that was lifted in the beginning of 1994. So the women in my class were the first women that had the opportunity to go to helicopter squadrons and fighter squadrons and combatant ships, et cetera. So I did that. I picked a combatant ship and I did well in my first tour. That set me up to be able to lateral transfer to aviation, spend about 12 years flying helicopters. And then boom, wouldn't you know it, I'm a commander select and I get sent to the Pentagon, which is where most senior officers go at some point in their career, which you very well know, Candace. In that role, I was just assigned randomly to be the executive assistant to the chief information officer of the Navy. And honestly, at that point, I didn't even know the Navy had a chief information officer or what that person did. So I had a lot of learning to do in order to be successful at my job. It turns out I'm a quick learner and I'm really good at building relationships. And so people in the building who I knew were very happy to help me when I asked questions, and I would take notes in a meeting and kind of pretend I knew what was going on and write, nod my head smartly. Then after the meeting, go find somebody that I knew and say, can you explain this to me? I don't understand what's going on here. And they were happy to do it. So that was my pivot to technology. And I did that for 4 years in uniform. And then when I retired, a GS-15 job opened up to be the deputy CIO for the Navy. And I was hired into that job. I was a client of Gartner. I had an executive partner, and about 3 years into my civilian job, they came to me and said, well, what would you think about coming to work for us? And I could not believe it. I mean, I really thought, me? Like total imposter syndrome. And I took the job and really enjoyed working with Gartner. And then about 3 years later, realized it was time for a change and started looking around on LinkedIn, and this job had splunked into my inbox. And now I'm at Splunk. And that's it.
That is awesome.
Yeah. I mean, it was just a series of good fortune and hard work and building relationships.
Absolutely. And I think what's really critical to that background of your story that's, incredibly moving for me is the fact that you had the opportunity. I mean, you were one of the first, and the people that came before you opened that door for you, especially in the Navy, and you were able to walk through it with pride, then become an aviator, then go. And while you're at the Pentagon, there's this new area, this new pivot, and that really points to taking opportunities that are presented to you that you didn't even know existed sometimes and flourishing in them. I think that really says a lot about some of the attributes that you kind of capture while you were in the Navy.
Yeah, of course. Now looking back, I see all of that. I did not realize that's what was happening, that someone was opening up doors for me to walk through. And I took the chance. It's funny, Candace, I told some people when I first started working at Gartner and definitely at Splunk, I don't really consider myself a risk taker. I'm fairly conservative. Like, I only drive 10 miles over the speed limit. I cross at the crosswalk. And people laugh at me. They're like, wait. You join the Navy, you go out on a destroyer, you're a helicopter pilot, and you don't consider yourself a risk taker. I've had to look at myself and say, well, I guess I am kind of a risk taker, because when you say yes to an opportunity that you never would have thought of or really didn't know much about, that is taking a risk. And the older I get, the more experience I get, the more calculated those risks are. But I'll be honest, looking back, I'm pretty proud of myself for taking more risks than I ever would have thought I would as an 18-year-old or as a 25-year-old or even as a 30-year-old. I'm so glad I did, because the world is full of so many cool opportunities. They're just out there for the taking. You just have to kind of trust that when people who know you say that you are a good candidate for an opportunity, you have to believe them. And I realized that I was holding myself back for probably the first 10, 15 years of my career. And then I started believing in other people who knew me and saying, you know what, if they think I'm good at this, I'm probably good at this. I'll say yes.
Well, that's awesome. We're incredibly fortunate as a country that you did say yes. And the fact that you've pivoted back and forth. And that is one big point that you talked about when you got to the Pentagon. You're assigned this new job, and you're really talking about kind of digital transformation, the step that you take in, and then you started walking at a faster pace in this area. And how do you see that? How do you compare kind of the fact that now you are in such a data-rich environment that where you're working at Splunk? How do you kind of see that forecasting into the future?
That is a great question, because you're right. I would say that my career and how I pivoted and how I learned quickly and then used that learning into a new career, that is exactly relatable to digital transformation. That's what we mean by agility. That's what we mean by you learn something, you make mistakes, you build relationships, and that pivots you into a new direction. And that is entirely relevant to when I speak with government leaders or public sector leaders about that's the mindset of digital transformation. You have to be open to learning something new, being humble, reaching out, learning, making mistakes, and then going, I need to turn left. This is where the market is going, or this is where technology is going, or this is where the world of work is going thanks to the pandemic. And I'm fortunate that I had the last couple decades to build that muscle, kind of learn that it's okay to step into something new and then learn and then switch directions when you have to. And that's how leaders today need to be thinking about digital transformation. Unfortunately, in the Department of Defense, there is still a very large bureaucratic machine in terms of acquisition. And we have to write a contract that's going to be good for something 10 years later. I mean, I think we all recognize that is not the way the world should be operating today. But we also have to be practical and realize that it's going to take a long time for those acquisition processes and well-meaning leaders to change, the processes that are in place. Plus, there's laws and regulations that go along with how the government buys things. But to get leaders to be thinking about, we've got to find ways to make decisions faster, to say yes to things that maybe we question a little bit. That's what taking risk is all about. Taking calculated, well-informed risks. Because if we don't, our competitors are going to continue to find our, let's say, weaknesses and capitalize on them, and we're going to fall further and further behind. So I think that's what you were getting at with your question, Candace. Did I miss something or miss an element of your question?
No, absolutely. You're spot on. And I think that, people understand where those seams are. And sometimes it is difficult to be in the government, but those that are in there are the ones that really have to make that change. And you've spoken one bit as well about sharing information, right? We all want to do what's best for national security. You speak a lot about why data is so important. And when people know different bits of it, but if you're not compiling it all together or at least sharing it to get to the right person, whether it be the decision maker, the customer, someone that really needs to have that particular nugget to come to a much better resolution, there can be flaws in the system. And I think some of your history, especially when you're in the Navy, had a great lesson from that. Would you mind sharing that with the audience?
Sure. There was a time, and this was before I pivoted into technology. This was when I was a helicopter pilot. I barely had any awareness of what it was called, the gig at the time, the Global Information Grid. But I was a helicopter pilot. I just wanted to execute my mission safely, be a good leader, and all of that. And there was, 15 years ago or something like that. But this is a routine mission that the Navy executes all the time. And that is when a carrier strike group goes in and out of the Straits of Hormuz into the Persian Gulf. So when an aircraft carrier goes in and out, it takes a bunch of ships with it. And they generally transit the straits during the day. Well, when that happens, the jets on the aircraft carrier are grounded. They don't fly. The jets don't fly, but the helicopters do. And the reason is to just kind of fly around and protect the carrier and make sure that no bad actors in the area get any ideas about getting too close, to the ships. And routine daytime mission. And I was the aircraft commander. We were just basically flying lazy circles around the aircraft carrier and some of the ships in company. It was a normal mission and everything was just standard until it wasn't. Two things happened. And the first was we saw with our eyeballs, because my helicopter that I was flying did not have radar. We noticed that this Iranian fast patrol boat was coming at us at pretty high speed with bad guys on it. And they were waving Iranian flags and coming straight at us. And so we had time. There's evasive maneuvers you take to show that you mean no harm. And we weren't trying to be a threat to these guys, but we definitely wanted to increase the distance between us and make them go away, while also showing them that we were protecting the carrier. So we start turning a lazy turn to the left, getting some distance, trying to reach them on the radio. And when we made that turn, the next thing happened. My co-pilot unintentionally hit the switch that fires chaff out of the helicopter. And chaff is not a weapon, but it looks like an explosion. It looks like you're shooting at someone when you fire it. This big cloud comes out of the side of the helicopter, a loud bang, and basically millions of tiny pieces of aluminum foil. It's not aluminum foil, but that's what it looks like. They pop outside the side of the helicopter, and it's meant to be a decoy. So if there's any missiles coming at you, that the missile is trained on that cloud of foil instead of the larger metal object that is the helicopter. So it looks like we've just fired at them, is basically what happened. So you might imagine that the crew in the back are kind of freaking out a little bit. They're chaff, chaff, chaff. And so we then have to move faster to get away from this cloud, because that's the maneuver, and also worry about what these Iranians are thinking. So long story short, we don't get shot down that day. Thank God. That's why I'm sitting here talking to you. But not good, not a good day. So we are able to get the carrier to bring the small boat up on the radio. Somehow it all settles itself out. Honestly, I don't remember the details. All I remember is we landed safely, we shut down, we go inside, and we debrief. And you might imagine that there was a lot of tense words, being thrown back and forth. But the reason I bring this story up and the reason it's relevant is because that almost turned into World War III because of a lack of data and information in the cockpit. The first thing was that the intelligence brief that we had gotten earlier in the morning had gotten stale, and we did not get an update. And so we did not know that Iranian boat was out kind of harassing other ships throughout the day, including merchant vessels and Navy vessels. If we had known that, maybe we would have reacted differently. We would have said, oh, that's contact XYZ, and this is what we need to do to just kind of leave them alone. But the second more important thing was the switch, the faulty switch. Somebody had made a mistake in the maintenance log, and that information never made it to us as the crew when we were pre-flighting the aircraft. If we had known that the switch was bad, it would have been called a downer. We would have never taken that helicopter. There would not have been an opportunity to misfire. Two pretty big mistakes there. And I think now that's one story from like 15 years ago, from one person on one mission. Think about all the military missions every day today, Candace, even with the more advanced technology and better communications. This kind of stuff happens. People make decisions based on faulty information all the time. And it's really not acceptable. We're in a world today where the technology exists that we shouldn't have warfighters out there wondering if they're making the right decision based on the right data. We've got to get to a point where we take that off their shoulders so they can do what they're trained to do and be focused and not freak out when, something goes wrong because they didn't have the data in the cockpit.
That really speaks also to understanding so much of the rapid changes of advanced analytics, of artificial intelligence, of database decision-making. That is just such a fantastic example of how all of those things couple together and really could have altered what occurred. But I think just learning from that story, you can bring things forward we learn from our mistakes just as much as we learn, probably even more than from our successes. And I am, as I've spoken before in the past, I'm a big fan of after action reviews and also learning from failure, right? Because everything is not going to be a home run. With your pivots and your different jobs and the careers that you've had, we've talked in the past about kind of those learning opportunities. But there's one great example that you've given also in learning from failure. And I think it goes to show where you sit is what you think the future holds. For instance, the military is really good at kind of giving you a timeline. And they base everything off a very linear promotion path. But the world isn't like that. And sometimes when you're viewing the world from that angle, it can seem all-encompassing. When you step out, you can really see, wow, there is a much larger world out there. So kind of talk to listeners a little bit about some of the decisions that you've made with respect to your pivot.
There's just one that I often go to, and it has to do with career. And I bring this up because I share this story when I mentor young women or young people in technology, but I often speak with a local high school group of girls who code, and I tell them this story. Also adults, because a lot of us want to make career pivots and we love to hear from people who have done it. This story is about when I was a government civilian. So after I retired as a commander, on the Navy staff, on the OpNav N2, N6 staff in the Pentagon, I was able to step into a GS-15 role as the deputy CIO. And at that time, I was an adult. I'd been around a bunch of deployments and felt I was pretty experienced, knew the building. I'd been in the Pentagon for 4 years at that time. And I really thought that people would ask me, well, what do you really want to do with your life now? And what's like the pinnacle achievement? I really just wanted to be a senior executive, an SES on the Department of Defense staff. And that is a great goal. But it wasn't the only thing I should have or could have been thinking. But that's what I had in my mind. And so I remember applying for all these SES jobs, and most of them were inside the DoD because that's the knowledge and experience that I had. Some of them were outside in different agencies, but let's say agencies that are quite similar to the DoD. For example, Department of Homeland Security. And I was, doing leadership development courses and trying to clean up my resume. And I was interviewing for these jobs that I really thought I should have had. I really felt like I am the best candidate. They need me. They want me. And I still believe that that's true. But after interview after interview and final selection panel after final selection panel, there was one particular job that I did not get selected for. And I thought, you know what? They're just not that into me. Like I finally realized either I was doing something wrong or the department just didn't look at me as a senior executive leader. And I looked at myself in the mirror and I was like, maybe it's time for me to be looking somewhere else. And wouldn't you know it, because I had been building relationships and I was a really good client of the company that I then went to, they came to me and said, hey, Julie, I went by Julie at the time. They said, what would you think about coming to work for us? And I could not believe it. This was an industry company outside of the government. I had never thought I would have the credentials really to work anywhere outside of the DoD or the federal government. And I, applied for the job and I got it. And that was when I realized there's this whole other world out there that I didn't even know existed. I had this mindset of government, which is a wonderful place for people to work. And I'm glad that I did. And I'm glad that others did. But it wasn't really catapulting me to where I wanted to be in the next 5-10 years. And so I started opening up my mind. And wow, what a world opened up. All these other companies, I realized that as a history major, I have a bachelor's degree in history. I have a master's degree in leadership. I do not come from a computer science background. And I thought that would limit me from going into technology companies. And that just wasn't true. I realized that there's a world out there for everyone with different skills and talent: HR, marketing, sales, product, engineering, social science. And there's room for everyone in technology, all kinds of skills and experience. And I really thank God for opening that door for me, because it then led me to Splunk, and it leads me to opportunities like this, talking with you, Candace, and sharing my story with other people that they think they might be limited by what their background is. And I'm here to tell you, the world changes so fast, technology changes so fast, there really is a place for everyone. I love telling that story because it gives hope to a lot of people who think, man, I should have been a computer science major. And I'm like, no, you're put here for a reason, and you have skills that are useful, not to mention your own personality and, attitude about work and all of that. So that's my pivot story. And I hope that it gives some inspiration to somebody.
I'm sure it will. Absolutely. I think there are so many components and parts and pieces to that. It is a true tale to say there are fantastic people in the government that have done more than 3 decades of really hard work for the national security community, but you're still doing that work. And that's the thing, it's just from a different angle. Talking about relationships, that relationship with yourself and someone you worked with while you were in government service ended up pushing you towards a different career, and a very successful one as well. So what were those things that you wish you'd known when you were in government, that especially in the Department of Defense, that you'd like to share?
Thank you for that question, Candace. I might ruffle some feathers here or upset some people, but I'm just going to say it. When I was in the government, and I still see it today, because at Splunk, I support the public sector. So our customers are from the federal government, state and local government, and higher education. So I still engage daily with leaders inside governments of all sizes. And one thing that is still true today that was true then is there's still a pretty broad feeling of us versus them, government versus industry. I specifically remember as a GS-15 and as a commander in the Pentagon, senior leaders telling me, don't meet with vendors. I don't meet with vendors. Don't meet with vendors. We give that to the junior people on the staff because we're too busy for that. We don't have time for that. And I thought that was true. I mean, I went along with that. Now, I did meet with more than my senior executive boss did, because I'm a people person, and I actually wanted to meet with folks and learn about technology more than I already knew. But there is a very widespread feeling of government, we know best. We should build it ourselves. Industry's only here to sell us stuff and take our money. Well, there is a definite middle ground there that I try to talk about publicly, that I try to get government leaders to think about. And a lot of them do. I mean, I'm not saying that people are still, their mindsets are back a decade or two ago, but it is pretty widespread. I wish I could go back to my GS-15 deputy CIO days and just be more open to, yes, we'll take that meeting with you, company XYZ, or let's have an industry day and let's really bring in industry technical folks and non-technical folks to learn what we don't know and what we don't have the capacity to do inside the Department of Defense. Because the DoD has a lot of really important missions, but I'll argue that building software isn't and shouldn't be one of them. That's what commercial industry exists to do. And that's one lesson. The lesson is the world will be better if we come together and really partner, government and industry side by side, bringing the best of what we bring. Government has the domain expertise. They have the talented staff, the dedicated public servants, the knowledge of their domain and their mission set. Industry comes with the rapid technology, the agile product development, the ability to hire the top technical talent when maybe the government takes a little bit longer. We can be so much stronger if we just start working together and not fighting against the, oh, you have a green badge and I have a blue badge, so, I can't talk to you. That's my number one lesson, Candace. One thing I wish I had done differently and wish I could do differently now.
That is such an awesome lesson. And I will tell you, there are so many different organizations out there, especially on the nonprofit side, that try to bridge that gap as well, that are really moving to close the seam between the two. But cultures are still very, very entrenched in seeing things from one particular vantage point. And it's great that we can kind of share that with listeners so that especially those just stepping into government who are listening can really understand that as long as you are within the ethical bounds of what your lawyer will say is okay, go ahead and do it. Set those meetings up. You're going to have phenomenal conversations. And at the end of the day, it's what makes the country best and the relationships that you can build. And that is relationships, so important, incredibly awesome. As we've had a great discussion thus far, I kind of want to end on one great point that I talk about with all of the wonderful people that have participated in Candid Leadership, and that's mentorship. What are your thoughts about mentoring?
Of course, you wouldn't be where you are. I wouldn't be where I am without the support and the help of mentors along the way. But one thing I like to share, especially with younger folks, is that I took probably longer than I would have liked to realize what my personal responsibility and my role was in my own career development. I remember probably only about 10 years ago or so, I started hearing this concept of, especially with women, professional women saying, well, I have my own personal board of advisors and board of directors. And I was like, ooh, that sounds cool. And they said, no, I have different mentors that some help me with my personal brand and some help me with my financial literacy and some help me with how to present and speak in public. And I was thinking to myself, well, I don't have that. I don't have a personal board of directors. What's wrong with me? Why doesn't anybody want to mentor me? I'm so awesome. Wouldn't anybody want to mentor me? And then I had this aha moment, like, wait a second. I need to go out and find people. I need to be active in my own career, in my own development, and identify at least one person that I would like to ask to help me or be my mentor. And then that will turn into other relationships, because then that person might know somebody else who would want to help someone like me, or my network would grow that way. I really feel that I waited too long to take an active role in my own career, kind of back to my career pivot story. I was thinking, well, surely the government will look at me and say, wow, what an awesome GS-15. We need to make her an SES. No, it was on me. It was on my shoulders to make myself stand out. And same with mentorship. Now, younger folks don't realize that that's what they need to do. And that's where people like you, Candace, and myself can reach down and bring up people who are younger. But once they start getting into their, adult life and more adult career path, I think most people would realize that they do have the power to reach out and ask someone to be a mentor. But you have to do that yourself and not wait for people to do it. The people that 10 years ago were saying, I have a board of directors, they had that because they put that in place. And I started doing that for myself. And this is what I encourage younger people earlier in their career to do. Go look at LinkedIn and look at the people who do interesting work or the companies that they work for, and reach out to them and ask if they would mind sharing some of their time and what you're looking for in a mentor or what you think you might want to do in a career. But take ownership of your own life and your own career and find mentors that are willing to help you along that journey. That's my piece of advice there.
Juliana, that's spot on advice. I cannot agree more heartily to the fact that you are your best career manager, and no one cares as much about your career as you do. Now, there are so many great people out there that are willing to lend you a hand that they'll do it. They'll absolutely help you out, but sometimes you just have to ask. And that is great advice, that you really do have to dig in, care about where you're going, methodically think about it. And it can't be any easier now that we use social media. There are so many advantageous online opportunities that now is the time to pursue. Plus, the hiring market is pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's a great time for people to be building relationships and networks. And yeah, like you said, you just have to ask for what you want. That's another piece of great advice I learned in a leadership development program. Don't assume that people know you're ambitious. Don't assume that people, are just sitting around waiting for somebody to go mentor. Own it. And if somebody doesn't want to do it, they'll tell you. But what have you lost? You don't lose anything by reaching out, but you can gain a great friend, a great mentor, an advisor, or a champion for life. If people are on LinkedIn, that's a pretty good signal that they are willing to communicate and network with you. Otherwise, they would hide in the shadows and they wouldn't be there at all.
Exactly, precisely. Is there anything else you'd like to speak with listeners about today?
I think we've covered most of the topics, in terms of career pivots, technology pivots, looking for opportunities, walking through doors that are open for you. I think that's great content. I'm so glad that you do this for your listeners, Candace. It's really important for others to just see how other people become successful, how others climb the ladder or climb the jungle gym or the lattice matrix or whatever you want to call it these days. A lot of times it just takes one small step, just putting yourself out there, asking someone to help, saying yes to an opportunity that maybe you don't feel you're entirely qualified for. So what? Put yourself out there and see what happens. There might be someone on the other end looking for someone just like you. And it's pretty exciting. So thank you for doing this work and putting this podcast.
Well, thanks so much for serving as a guest here. I really appreciate you being here. And listeners, I really appreciate you listening to this conversation with Juliana Vida. If you want more candid perspectives on leadership, go to colonelcandid.com. As we mentioned in the beginning, I'm always up for recommended guests. And this season was full of great leaders and mentors recommended by you, the listener. I would also encourage you to share this podcast with people that you know. If you've benefited from the information or wisdom shared by any of our guests. I know I grow with every listener that we have, and the show absolutely grows by word of mouth. I would encourage you to share this podcast with your friends, colleagues, or whoever you think could benefit from the information and wisdom shared by my amazing guests. I know I grow with every conversation, and I want to share that experience with as many leaders as I can. So this show grows by word of mouth. Be sure to share it, and please, if you think I've earned it, leave Candid Leadership a 5-star review on wherever you find yourself listening to this podcast. Thanks again for joining me. All views expressed are my own. I'm Colonel Candace Frost.